present quorum of the Rock Island City Council due to the disaster declaration issued by Governor Pritzker. Because of this order related to COVID-19 public health concerns affecting the state and the city, the mayor has determined that an in-person meeting at City Hall with all participants may not be practical or prudent. For this reason, alderpersons and staff may not all be physically present at City Hall, and physical public attendance at City Hall may be limited. This meeting may be viewed live on Channel 9 for Mediacom customers living in Rock Island or on the city's YouTube channel.
Thank you. Do a roll call, please.
Alderman Robinson,
Present.
Alderman Hurt,
Here.
Alderwoman Gilbert,
Present.
Alderwoman Swanson,
Here.
Alderman Parker,
Here.
Alderman Poulos,
Here.
Geenan,
Present.
and Mayor Tomes.
Here.
We have a quorum.
Thank you. All right, we have a presentation.
Okay, thank you.
Police Community Relations, they're good.
How's it going? Mayor Tomes, Mr. Tweet, and council. Thank you all for your willingness to hold this study session behind this very important matter. And I would also like to thank you, Mr. Tomes, and the other council members that I met with on last week, I believe, and throughout these past 20 days or so, we've been since this formal request. And so with that being said, we are here to discuss the moving forward in the process forming this Police Relations Commission here in the city. And so I do have 3 members of my team here with me that will be assisting in this presentation. And I will, we have AJ Julian, Annika Amelia, and Tamara Feldon here with me. And so we'll be transitioning accordingly. Therefore you have to call us up so that way we can expedite things. Don't keep you here too long. And so with that being said, I will add that I am encouraged. Maybe my tone doesn't say it. It's been a long day, but I am encouraged by the meetings that we've had, the dialogue we had. There were some tough questions. We had to get down to some deep understanding. But at the end of the day, much of like we've been saying for some time now, we're much more alike than we are different. And I believe that in our dialogue that we had, my team and myself with you all, it shows that. And we'll get to the bottom of that today. So with that being said, I'll have AJ come up here.
Hello, everyone. How you doing? AJ Julian. Throughout my career, my life, I've been always in logistics. I've always been able to, and I've always been a part of a company or been part of a situation where we have always moved things from one place to the other. That is where I would say, if I had to say I had expertise, my expertise is moving things, getting things from point A to point B, and getting them there in the same condition that they left. And so we want to talk to you this morning about this commission that we want to get into. So we want to get into the underlying premises. And I just want to give you some history of how we got to where we are right now. It's part of an organization that was dealing with police reform. And in that, we met with senators, congressmen. We met with state representatives. We met with mayors. We met with police departments. We met with police chiefs, and we met with everyone that we could in our community. One of the things that most people didn't know is that this particular group also met with a group of police officers because we felt like we could not change or effectively have a good opinion about anything without involving all parties. In that particular meeting, we asked them, how did you feel about, this was during the time of George Floyd, and they were very honest and forthright. They were hurt. They were dismayed. They said, this does not represent who we are. And they felt like they were being prosecuted for something that someone else did that they didn't have anything to do with. As an African-American male, I understood. I had a point of connection with them because I have been part of a situation where people looked at me on the outside and judged me without looking at the content of my character. This is not about anti-police. This is not about who's for the police or not against the police. And we have become a society where we make people choose sides. The only side that we want to talk about today is community. See, our police officers are part of the community. Our community, our citizens are part of the community. We are all in the same boat, whether we like to be in the boat together or not. We are all in the same boat. In this particular meeting, one officer pulled me on the side. He said, something broke in me. I was on a call. He didn't tell me what kind of call it was. He said, I was on a call. I walked into the apartment. A 2-year-old kid saw me start screaming and running. To him, he says, what has made this child afraid of me? What is the breakdown in our community that people don't feel trusted with police officers? And what is it about our police officers that they have to go through of all the things that they give and all the things that they do, and we give them all the credit for doing what they do. But what makes them hurt? Because I'm going to tell you right now, as an African-American male, I don't care who or what group we're talking about. I don't want anyone to have to feel like I felt when I've walked into rooms and been judged by the color of my skin and not the content of my character. No one, absolutely no one, should have to go through that. I am not about being pro-police and not police. If the police had all the answers, we wouldn't be talking. If the community had all the answers, we wouldn't need police. Until we come together as a community and have dialogue, things are not going to change. See, in the 1980s, we declared war on drugs, and we made our police departments paramilitary, and we were always about them protecting us from the bad people. What we didn't do is that we empowered them to protect people, but we forgot about the second stanza of their motto, which is to serve. Their motto is to make communication, to make relationships with people. That makes their job easier. See, we empowered the police to do a job, told them to do the job, and they did the job. And then we got mad when they did the job. And so now we're trying to figure out in this new age of time, how can we better coexist as a total community, not as us against them, not as Black Lives Matter compared to Blue Lives Matter. It ain't about that. So if we don't have all the answers, but I think this commission starts the bridge that would allow us to have open dialogue and communication. I have a different view of police officers after that conversation because I felt their pain. I felt how they felt. And for those who have been, and let me say this, the police department is no different than any other organization in this world. There are great police officers, but we cannot be naive enough to think that there are not bad police officers. Even the police chief, the conversations that we've had have said, there are some guys I'd rather not have hired. Or after I hired them, I wish I could get rid of them. Because of unions and whatever else, I could not do that. But no one should be judged by someone else's crime against humanity. And so what this commission does is open the opportunity for us to talk. I'm almost done. I'm a preacher, so you better watch out. Because I'll say that 3 times and I may not be done. Recently, a local city had a violence spiking in their community, and they had a news conference. And in that news conference were various community leaders standing behind the mayor, and they were saying, we need to do something. We as a community need to come together, and we need to do something about this violence. But when the metal hit the road, the meeting was closed off to only the police department. See, this is what I found out in corporate America. You can come up with all the new stuff that you want to, but if you don't have buy-in, it's not going to work. I'm just telling you, our police department is one of the best. I will go on record to say that I've got phone calls when they shot the shooting at 11th Street, and they said, this is what's going on, AJ, la, la, la. You know what I told them? I said, it is not the MO of the Rock Island Police Department to shoot somebody unjustified. I can say that. But I can say also that there are some problems that we still need to address. What we've come to the conclusion is, again, that we've become a divided community that either you are for or against. And it's not about either one of them. What's best for the city of Rock Island? I chose to live here when I came here in 1988. I chose to have my kids go here. I don't want to move. I don't want to be anywhere else. And so we have that in common. And if we work from that base of what we have in common and that, not what we have different, we'll find ourselves creating a community that will be what we want it to be, a representation of all people who feel included in everything. Those police officers that were hurt because they're being judged by the uniform and not who they are. The natural response for them is to close rank and stick together, not talk to people. It is the most destructive thing that they could possibly do, because the community needs to know that they're doing this because they love what they're doing. And we need to, and as a community, we have some things to say, because we cannot keep allowing our police officers to do things that they really wasn't meant to do. They were not meant to be counselors. They were not meant to raise somebody else's kid. They were not meant to go to your neighbor's house and say, stop letting your dog poop on my grass. That's not what they're called to do. They want to catch real bad guys. But that's not what we asked them to do. We asked them to do everything, and every time they make a mistake, that's messed up. And then we also asked, our community is asking, I just want to be treated fairly. And no matter who you are, I don't care who you are, I don't care how you feel, no one wants to be treated less than who they are. This commission, I believe, will help us bridge that gap to be exactly what the kind of city that we need to be, which is a city that listens, not always agrees, but listen. Because if I know you understand me, we have a place to work from. But if you're not listening, now everything else, anger, rebuttal, defiance, all those things will come into play, and we will not ever be unified. So I'm going to do something really great today, something that most preachers would never do. I'm actually going to sit down after only one. I'm going to close.
You're not coming back up?
The problem is you didn't take an offer.
So the bad news is, when I'm coming up, things usually get a little wonky, because obviously when we're saying we are requesting the creation of a 12-member commission representative of the community, a lot of conversations have gone into what does that mean? What is it we actually want? How are we actually going to do that? So what I would usually not do, read the contents of the slides, I will actually do today, because there's a lot of detail here that I think is important, and we want to walk through that. So the purpose of the commission is to help build a more trusting relationship between law enforcement and segments of our community that have historically lacked trust in law enforcement. And AJ has spoken to a child's reaction to a police officer, right? And we live at a time when a lot of different people have a lot of different reactions to law enforcement. And the question is, can we indeed rise above that? And can we find the practical way to do that? We want to encourage the recruitment of people of color into law enforcement careers, because one of the things we're hearing is it's very difficult to hire police officers, and it's even more difficult to hire a diverse police force. So that is something where we feel the commission can have a role in the community to perhaps help with that. We want to assist in the development of policies that foster just and equitable treatment of all residents, regardless of race, color, creed, age, sex, national origin, ancestry, religion, marital status, physical or mental disability, sexual orientation, military status, or unfavorable discharge from military service, or prior conviction of a crime. In other words, everybody should be treated equitably and fairly, right? We want to have a role in advising the city council, the city manager, the mayor, and the public in developing policies that protect the rights of residents as defined by our laws and Constitution, including rules meant to protect residents from retaliation resulting from a complaint to secure compliance with policies resulting from this work. Right? We know that sometimes complaints are made, sometimes they are justified, sometimes we don't know whether they are. understanding these things better and understanding how this plays out, none of us like to be criticized for the role in our work, right? That gives us that little bit of a rush of heat that we're being judged by someone unfavorably. We want to be able to look at that and understand it better. The role of the commission would be to have access to, be able to review and investigate complaints, to provide recommendations for purposes of future policy development. That word investigate tends to make people perhaps a little bit nervous. It is not our intention to go in and reinvestigate cases. Our intention is to understand how did the interaction, the contact between law enforcement and community play out. Do we understand the needs of the community as well as we can? Do we understand the needs of law enforcement as well as we can? And can we find contact points that perhaps could be changed in some way for the better so that over time we see outcomes that are more favorable? To conduct separate internal investigations in cases where the Rock Island County Integrity Task Force is activated, to study them from the Commission's perspective, and to provide policy feedback based on findings. Again, to understand what happened in a given case. How can one come at that from a different perspective that is perhaps not invested in the same way in which members of the community and members of law enforcement are invested, but from a different viewpoint? To recommend new programs that address the diversity of the community and its impact on policing, and advise the city manager and chief of police in the implementation of such programs. I think that's fairly self-explanatory. To help develop procedures to anticipate, prepare for, and help ease community discomfort that may arise from police and community interaction, and to foster greater resident participation in the planning, implementation, and execution of public policy at all phases of policing in Rock Island. And I know it's always a challenge to get the community to participate. I've been a teacher for a long time, and one of the things faculty say to each other when students demand the creation of a new commission or organization or task force is that students demand the right to participate in a process that then they feel at liberty to completely ignore. And I think that is a little bit something that we can see in community relations, and that is something we feel the commission could be helpful with. To assist in the development of educational programs aimed at equity and inclusion for all, particularly those who have historically lacked such opportunities. In other words, work with the community to stabilize, help stabilize things that are perhaps in need of improvement that could have an impact on community police relations. Host quarterly community meet and greets between Rock Island law enforcement officers and community members at a variety of locations other than the police department. It is not easy for many people to walk into a police department. I'm a person who's always enjoyed great privilege. I will happily march into the police department, but obviously I am different from many people who do not have the same privileges and would not be as comfortable doing that, and I think that's something we need to recognize. Host meet and greets for all new police department hires as part of their orientation. And when we say police department hires, that's not necessarily only law enforcement officers, sworn officers, but individuals who have a variety of roles, because the police department is a large, complex organization, and obviously we would want that understanding of the community to be resident with all. Have a non-voting observer/advisory role in the contract negotiations between the City of Rock Island and police unions. In other words, we're not expecting to make decisive changes in such interactions, but it would really be helpful for the Commission to understand what are the sticking points, what are the issues, where do we really get stuck, and where are participants in these negotiations really sensitive about points, and is there another perspective one can bring to that? The appointments, terms, and meetings of the Commission are quite straightforward. Appointment to the Commission would be made, as to other commissions, by application to the mayor and a designated representative of the resolution and approved by the City Council. A group of 4 members each would be appointed for a term of 3 years, so that we always have the majority of that commission continuing, and the initial appointments would then be made for staggered terms, and meetings would be held monthly. And I will turn it over to Annika Omelia at this point.
So just to review, just to review the duties and powers. So the commission shall advise and consult with the mayor, city manager, and city council on all matters involving police-community relations. The commission shall render an annual report to the mayor, city council, and Rock Island residents with public reports redacted however is required by law. And the commission shall invite and enlist the cooperation of racial, religious, and ethnic groups, community organizations, fraternal and benevolent societies, veterans organizations, professional and technical organizations, and other groups in the city in carrying out its work. The commission may aid in the formation of local community groups in such neighborhoods as it deems necessary or desirable to carry out specific programs designed to lessen tensions with or improve understanding of law enforcement in the community. And the commission shall be granted reasonable cooperation and assistance of city departments as needed. And then Thurgood and I were going to talk a little bit about the next section together.
All right, so we're at what we heard and request. I get to press a button this time. Thank you, Annika. And so, as you heard and we talked about, we believe Rock Island needs a Community Police Relations Commission to be proactive in the policy development and to help create a safer community here in Rock Island for all. And so we're going to get into now here are some of the particular concerns we heard in our numerous meetings with you all and those community members that we met with in organizations that saw our draft that we sent to you and provided further input because this is not about one being doing something on their own accord. It's bigger than ourselves. And so I'll let Annika speak to the concerns that we heard, and then I'll chime in a little bit as far as where we are with those concerns. Thank you.
So this is kind of wanting to show you guys and also maybe anyone watching that when we're looking at working together, that means compromise. And that is how, people and communities and engaged communities or healthy communities, that's what Thurgood says. And part of that engagement means we're trying to actively listen, reflect back what we hear, and look at where we can compromise to come up with a solution, which is how government should work, right? So the first thing that we're going to talk about, when we started out, we had stated that the commission needs subpoena power. We believed that without it, the commission would not be able to conduct effective reviews and gain insight into how law enforcement community encounters unfold and where policy improvements could be made. And so that was kind of where we came from initially. And Thurgood's going to talk about the feedback that we heard and where we think we can work together on this.
Awesome. I won't do the mundane thing of reading that. I'm just going to speak to the concerns a little bit. Thank you for your patience. A lot of you have heard all this already. And so the urgency of the matter would not hold up the formation of this commission. Outside of the complexities that subpoena power would require, the need for this commission we do not believe needs or the foundation of it is subpoena power. And so we understand costs that will come with it. We understand personnel matters that may come with that. And so the intent behind the commission is something that we are not going to hold to something where we would not move forward with. And so I don't know if I'm missing anything, but I would like to give opportunity for any of you to speak to that point, or if we miss anything from the discussions, or if you may disagree with where we're getting with that.
You're talking about disagreeing with this? I'm not sure.
So what I'm stating is
we would disagree
with the point that we where we came after requesting this formally in the initial draft of having subpoena power. We just stated here on the slide, and I just stated that that's not something that we will make something that we have to have because we spoke to, my team spoke to you, We spoke to other representatives. We spoke to our community. And so I'm asking if any of you want to speak to that point, or if you disagree with our compromise, so to speak, behind that point. So I'm opening it up for any potential feedback or words that the voting body, may have.
Well, first of all, if I may, I'm against subpoena power. And I think you understand why. There's a lot of confidential information, having been in law enforcement for over 38 years. There's some very critical information that could be leaked out without the intent of the commission. It could be leaked out to people that ought not have that information. And so with regard to cooperation, there are several things in here, and Reverend A.J., if I may, I appreciate your comments, having been a Vietnam vet, coming back from Vietnam. Just because I wore a green uniform, people spit on me because I was a baby killer. And I can tell you right now, I have never killed one child. But because I wore that uniform, because I am a person of color, I am put in a special category. So I understand. And I also appreciate the fact that you said that the officers felt like they were targets. And from my experience, some of them do. Are all of our officers perfect? Absolutely not. I think that our chief will will admit to that. I think the fellow officers would admit that they're not all perfect. So what concerns me, and I love some of the things that are in here, I really do. What concerns me is the amount of violence that we're seeing today, and this council had created one of our goals as reducing violence. And what that's going to need is cooperation from the community with the police department, not butting heads saying, I want to investigate you, but how, or you're not doing this or you're not doing that. How can we work together to reduce the amount of violence, person against person? And I'm not even going to bring race into it because there are a lot of black-on-black crimes. We all know that. I hate that with a passion. And there's not a lot of things I hate with a passion, but I hate, it just bothers me to no end to see the crimes that are committed. And some of those are like, okay, we'll just put that on the side. And other crimes that are, and I'll call them crimes, other things that are happening that we say, well, that's not fair. Let's treat them all the same way. If we're treating people, if we're treating our fellow citizens improperly, let's treat them all the same way. If we truly want to come together, let's come together. The commission and the police department, let's come together and discuss things. How can we as a community help the police department? How can we as a community help with programs that might help better train some of our officers? The officers aren't perfect. And again, going back to some of the other comments, and if I'm overextending my bounds, please say, hey, Mark, settle down a little bit. I'm very passionate about this because I believe that if you look at Sir Robert Peel, and he said, the police are the community and the community are the police. If you look at that and say, we need to come together. The community needs to come together with the police department. The police department needs to sit down with members of the community, not as an investigative body, but, okay, folks, something's broken here. What can we do to fix it? And have an open mind about things and be honest with each other. I don't agree with what you're saying. Okay. You don't agree with what I'm saying. Okay. We can agree to disagree, and we treat each other like responsible gentlemen should treat each other. Responsible citizens should treat each other. Let's come together and find out what's broken. And I think that some of your comments, I think that that's what you're trying to do. What's broken? What can we do to fix it? But I don't know that going through and investigating the very body that you're trying to work with is the proper way to do it. I think that if you have a complaint, that you sit down with members of the organization, whoever is appointed as those members, and say, this is an issue I have. And I've talked to members of the commission or members of the resolution or members of your team, and we have discussed things like this, and I've had very fruitful conversations, and we have come to agreements on many things. Sitting down with the police department, with the officers as they come on and saying, you know, can we help in developing these officers to be open and ready to respond to the situation. You're absolutely right. The officers are not trained in many things that they're required to respond to. I've experienced that myself, unfortunately. And I'm not perfect either. I wasn't perfect back then, and after 38 years, I'm still not. And 38 years from now, I probably still won't be. But it's a work in progress. I appreciate your time. I appreciate you letting me speak, and I'll defer to my other colleagues.
Can I make a suggestion real quick?
Can I comment? We're going to comment to that really quick,
Okay.
if you don't mind, Mr. Hurt.
Yep.
I appreciate that, Mr. Poulos, excuse me.
You're the first person that's pronounced that correctly, by the way.
My name's Thurgood, so you imagine all the pronunciation, spelling, and other grammatical errors that come when people address me, so I do my best to be conscious of that fact.
Thank you.
You're welcome, sir. I just want to speak to a couple of things. I appreciate that, your concern, and a lot of things you brought up. I think one of the first things I said when we got up here was I mentioned the fact that we met with formally on the record as far as the city council members and mayor. And so, and I think what I said is we found that we were more alike than we are different. And some of the things you insinuated, I think you danced around that, which I appreciate. And so, a lot of things that you're concerned about with the police, we're looking to address in this commission. We went over, and I did mark, but tomorrow's going to come up here in a second to respond as well. I did mark several points to foster better communication with the police department, to build a bridge, to get some understanding, to not point the finger, and to help ensure that nobody's feeling like us against them. And so, while we are asking for a review process, we're talking about mistrust here on within the community. It's difficult to create, build, and move forward with any trust if you're not going to review where it came from. And that's what we're getting at. And that's why we stated subpoena power is not something that, although we sent it in the first draft, everyone I spoke with, you didn't get to hear this, we told them that we sent this draft with the understanding of we may be moving backwards, and by that I mean things will be taken off. There's give and take when things are come down to it. And so we clearly stated before you spoke that subpoena power is something that we don't necessarily need due to some of the concerns you have. But as far as the community, I don't believe you were saying this or intended to say this, but we are speaking to the very fact that this commission will be able to communicate. You talked about feelings of officers and the concern the officers have of the community as far as you said black on black crime. And that's a term that you and I disagree with because studies show, and I'm sure you're a man of that study, you commit crimes against those that you live with, those that you love, or that you're among, and most times people that you are among, that you live with, that you love, look like you. And so whether it's a white person, Hispanic, someone of Asian descent, if you go look at it, you might be saying other on crimes due to that fact. And so I want to be careful, and that's something that we can speak to and maybe get an understanding of in the commission that we're talking about. Because if we had the mentality within our police force, then that is some of that misunderstanding that leads to that mistrust, that leads to some complaints, that leads to other things that is affecting everybody, sir, and that's what we're addressing. And so we do want to get on one accord. And you cannot do that if we're not all in this together, being open-minded, as you said, but you cannot be closed-minded enough to believe that we can build any kind of trust if we're just going to be simply talking and not addressing elephants in the room. And so with that being said, I'll let Tamara finish a response. Thank you.
I had a question you did not finish with me, Mr. Brooks.
I'm going to get back to you right now, I promise. She wants to speak to some of the concerns that Mark brought up. Thank you.
Okay.
So one of the things I wanted to come back to, and I think we have far more agreement than perhaps you realize, because I want to speak against the notion that we want a commission that investigates the police. That's not what we're asking. We're saying, here's our community. There's a lot in our community that needs to be looked at. We're not saying we have a community of perfect people. We're not saying we have a community where criminals are not criminals. We're not saying we have a community where policing is not needed. We're not saying the police department is perfect the way it is. We're saying there are multiple sides to this, and a better understanding from a perspective that is neither completely invested in what the community is saying, nor is completely invested in what the police department is saying, but comes from a neutral perspective towards both of those, can perhaps find solutions that otherwise are very difficult to find. A police officer in our current living in this country is in a really complicated situation, right? Any of us will look at police, or police will look at any of us and say, what am I looking at? How am I being perceived? How do I deal with this, right? It's a very difficult role to be in. We don't assume that there are no issues in the community. We feel that having a really good understanding of how community and police interactions work, we can have a role in the community to help with matters. So I think it's very important not to assume that the commission is meant to investigate police, because that is absolutely not the role. We consider this the role of, can we understand this from a perspective? I have, for a very long time, run a variety of operations. I have learned that when I wanted to implement something new, I had to work with the people at the very front end of my operation, because in the day-to-day detail of what they were doing and seeing, I learned some things about the systems I was creating that in the background, without that information, I could not have understood. That is sort of how we're looking at this, and it means we're neither for or against one or the other. We're saying something is broken, and what we have tried so far has not fixed it. And so putting a new player into the field to say, can we think about this in a new way? Can we look at every detail and see where can we have a role in making improvements? That's what we're coming from. So I wanted to clarify that.
Thank you, Dr. Veldman.
Mr. Hurt, sorry about that.
So, first of all, I'm going to say, just for the record, I'm not a proponent of the subpoena rights of the commission. Now, that being said, I feel like somewhere along the way of this presentation, and that we've gotten so off track of, I feel like you started presenting it, and then we have a question at the end, and I feel like we've now dove into some overall conversation, and this has not been presented completely yet. I mean, we went from subpoena powers to other stuff here. I think I would, I guess, ask the rest of the council as well to, let's get through these individual things, because I feel like we got sidetracked and we haven't even gotten out of the subpoena section yet. So I feel
I'll follow
like
you.
what I'm saying is, let's get through this. There is time for questions and answers, which I'm sure there's going to be plenty, but I feel like that conversation just got sidetracked to something that we were not even on.
No, I follow you.
So
I
I'd like
appreciate
to
that.
stick with whatever this is, and then we can go at the end. And I respectfully ask council to hold questions regarding specific sections here till we're done, because I feel like this has got off track here. Fair enough?
Just real quick, I don't think it was a question from us. Thurgood had asked us if we had any discussion on what he,
About the subpoena powers. in
exactly,
general.
so that's what Alderman Polis was talking about. He wasn't really asking a question, he was just making a statement based off that assumption.
Well, I thought we got kind of into something else and not just specific to the investigation and the subpoena stuff, so.
No, it was just
That
a
was my-
discussion, it was just a
I
discussion.
think a
about
lot of
subpoena.
that came from the fact that Mark spoke to a lot of other things,
No,
but it came from
no, and
subpoena
I get
power.
it. I'm not faulting anybody. I would just rather, in my opinion, I would rather just go through the presentation and then we all ask our questions at the end during the question and answer so that we don't get, so there isn't that potential to get sidetracked on something here.
I appreciate that.
That's all.
And I will mention, in the draft that we sent, there is a request for police officers to be on this commission as well, because we need that included. So I want to say that as well.
Do you want me to get up here?
Yeah.
So I'm a therapist. We all know this. And part of therapy is you try to tell someone what you think, they reflect it back to you, and then you confirm that you heard it right, which is a very useful way of communicating. So basically, we heard you say that you were uncomfortable with subpoena power. We were reflecting back to you that we don't need that to move forward. And so that's kind of the point of this part of the presentation, is to let you know where we are willing to compromise to get this commission in place. So the next part of it, where we started, the commission must have investigative duties and authority. Unless the commission can conduct detailed and complete case studies, effective policy recommendations cannot be developed. So that's where we started, and Thurgood's going to speak to what we heard from you and where we're taking that language now.
And so we spoke to this a little bit just now. It's not necessarily, the word investigate does get tricky. And so we consider our role as one to review and recommend aimed at policy development, not at reinvestigating past cases. Mayor Tomes and I had a great talk last Friday, I believe. We really had to get to an understanding, but I believe we did by the time the meeting was ended. And at the end of that meeting, by us getting to understanding of me stating to him that this commission's interest is not in investigating and making a decision to directly be the judge, so to speak. We're not the Station 30. That's not the power of this commission. They are not any other legal body that we vote for and/or that is appointed to make those decisions. However, reviewing is critical, and not in a format to exactly know who is included, because I think that was a concern from many of you. But it's important because we may find patterns of people that are members of our community that are constantly filing complaints that may be invalid, so to speak. We may need to get in touch with them with this commission to help make our community safer. If we have patterns within our police department, I'm sure you all would need to know that, as with the chief, so we can further along with that. And so that's really the review and recommend piece that we're looking for.
So the next part, the commission must be included in the negotiations with the police unions to provide a community perspective that may otherwise be lacking. So because they're talking, I'll just take this over. So we initially wanted that, but in hearing feedback from you, we kind of landed on, we seek to be included in a non-voting observer capacity. This will allow the commission to better understand the concerns of police officers and the city and develop recommendations to city leadership that reflect the perspective and needs of community members. However, we're not expecting to be a voting voice or have decision-making power, anything like that. We just want to be kind of a passive observer to understand the process better. Okay, let me read the rest of it. The next point is that the commission must protect the privacy of residents and officers when doing this work. And so when we were meeting with you, we did hear feedback that there were concerns. I know we want to have a high school student on this commission, so there were concerns about could commission members handle sensitive information, not leak things, you know. And so one thing that we are considering is just having data that is de-identified. And so if there was an officer, you know, that a pattern was emerging, we might not know their name, but we would know that they were Officer 17. Likewise, if there's a community member 4 and they keep coming up, you know, part of this commission is that we can call upon community organizations to also work with the community. Thurgood has said, as we're asking difficult questions, we also need to ask them of our community. And so what type of religious or benevolent entities could maybe rally around a person in the community who is perhaps has a high ACEs score and is maybe engaged in some behaviors that will make them not safe. And so that's one way we look to help the police and keep residents safe. Like Johnny might have a difficult encounter with police because of his behaviors. What elders or people in the community can work with Johnny to keep him safe and keep police officers safe. So we are willing to accept de-identified data until it would maybe get to a point where there's a real, reasonable, tangible benefit to know that data in order to keep police or community members safe. And then finally, that the commission will address retaliation that arises from complaints made by residents. So we want to be aware of retaliation. Maybe we would hear information about it. But again, we have no authority or mechanism for doing this. We will monitor complaints of retaliation to better understand how they reflect community law enforcement tensions and make policy recommendations based on such behaviors. And then finally, I know something that is very important is to have input, again, to be able to review and recommend around hiring and promotion matters. We did hear some feedback that it would be problematic from an HR perspective, from a legal perspective, for this committee to have power in the hiring and firing and promotion of police officers, chiefs, that type of thing. So we do not need to have a deciding vote or power, but we would very much like to review and make recommendations in that vein. So this is our active listening. You know, I hope that we heard what everyone said. I don't know if is that good?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
You're awesome. That's as Annika said, that's kind of what we heard within our meetings. That's what we heard from those community members that we spoke with upon sending this draft out to you all. So within that, I think Annika and those couple slides articulated where we may have come to a compromise, with the exception of one, the last item of the hiring recommendation process. That's something that we did not include in the draft. That was not included earlier on in the duties and powers and things of that sort. That's actually something that came up in our numerous discussion with organizations and peoples within the community. They felt that this commission could really be of service. And so that may be something that all of you may want to chime in a little bit more in more detail other than those other points on those same slides. But outside of that, again, I do believe we come to a lot of understanding, which leads to compromise. And we expect hopefully to lead to us sending you the draft of that compromise to further move forward with the passage of this. But before that, I'm sure we have more questions and comments, so we're open to that.
Mr. Brooks, can I go back to I know that wasn't listed on this, but we're talking about the creation of the commission itself and the members that you are proposing to be included.
Mm-hmm.
Now, obviously, you say you want a member of the legal profession. Who do you anticipate funding your I'm sure they're not going to do it for free.
Absolutely not. I'm a member of the Human Rights Commission. It requires someone in the legal profession as well. And we do that. I don't believe we fund them. I believe that they have the understanding when they come on that it's a volunteer, they're serving the community with the work they do. And so I don't think that'll be a concern of asking this commission to also have someone of that skill set in that profession, because we believe that perspective is important to a lot of that understanding we're talking about. And so, unless I'm wrong, I believe that's how that operates and that works.
Let me just clarify. We have several commissions that we've had some attorneys on and everything else, and they volunteer their time. It's up to them if they want to offer extensive legal services, but it really more it's the mindset you're looking for versus legal advice.
Understood, but there's probably a lot of people out here watching this, and I feel it's a question that warranted to
Right.
be asked
Yep.
at this time.
Thank you.
Did you want to say something, Dave?
I was just gonna say what you said, because I've been on, before I was the city attorney, I was on commissions that you volunteer your time, so I was just gonna say what you said. So,
Okay.
So can we go back a little bit, and I think I lost this somewhere in all the communication. What was the commission's stance on having the high school student again?
They're among our community. And I think Mayor Tomes, I spoke of this in detail. We're talking about equity, and we're talking about building responsible people in our community. I'm not asking for a 14-year-old freshman who may be dropping their books, amazed by how big the high school is, that really needs to focus on what they have to do to move forward and be successful in what they're doing. What I do believe, just as we have adults who may not belong in this commission, I don't think age should disqualify you. I think they are policed. We have high school students who junior and senior age who are qualified and are mature enough. I work with them on a day-to-day basis. Administrators will tell you that. Their teachers could tell you that. Their parents will tell you that. And it would be as important for us, regardless of if it's the high school age student, regardless if it's the trade, college age student that we're asking for, regardless if it's the police officers, the returning citizens, the person and the maturity and the quality will be of need, because we're talking about equity and building. And I do believe here in Rock Island, whether it's at our public school, it's our private school, we have students who administrators and people who are important in this community will speak to say that they have the capacity to sit on this commission to speak on their experiences and represent their peers, because they are a part of this community. And I think it's important for us as adults to recognize that, and not only recognize that, but build the confidence of them to be responsible human beings in our society as they grow, as we expect them to be. We got to prepare them for that.
So while I understand that, and I agree that there is some value in having a high school student as it relates to the community relations side of it, I do agree with that. However, I'm not in favor of having a high school student be involved in knowing about other certain things involving the police department that could be spilt out. They're not adults, they're not 18. I feel like for some reason that just seems odd to me, which brings me to
Can I make a comment on that real quick? I think what we have to do is we have to understand the day and age we're in. Our kids are exposed to everything on the internet. So this is a perfect opportunity to have a teaching moment with our kids, to teach them the correct way to how to gather information, how to be responsible, and prepare them for that next step.
they may be responsible
But we can't. We got to have trust in. We got to have trust in the process.
Can't let them leak
We can't say
information
that.
out social media
We
either.
By the way,
can't,
just
but
real quick-
we can't say what a kid can't do, because we have adults doing that. So we can't.
Adults are more accountable on a legal side of things if something goes
Real
awry,
quick,
whereas
their-
a minor is
Real
not.
quick, their draft deal just talked about age 18. It did not go below 18, just for clarification.
It says below 18 or
No, it does
18?
not. It's 18 to 23
Okay.
23 years of age.
And, and I'd like to say from the perspective of someone who used to be an educator and who's worked with a lot of kids, there are kids that are natural leaders.
Yep.
And so I think it's important to have not a youth, but a high school student on here, because they can carry that information back to their friends, back to their peers. And I think when you start building the trust of police and then the whole community relations thing, that's a very pivotal point, because you'd much rather have kids that are 16, 17-year-olds understanding why things are happening. You may not like what's happening, but you kind of start to understand because you have that peer-to-peer interaction, as opposed to, well, this is what happened and I'm just going to be mad and hate everybody and torch the town kind of mentality. So I
I
think
think you're
that,
misunderstanding what I'm getting at. I'm not, like I started, my comment was, I'm not opposed to the community relations side, but I think that's an important aspect, and that's kind of what, I think we're all in agreement to that. I personally, I guess to take it a step farther, I don't think the commission should be involved in contract negotiations or any of that, and I think that's information that you don't, first of all, I don't think it's the commission's, just my perspective, I don't think it's the commission's place to be involved in that, let alone, and then that's what brought me to the fact of having a high school student on there. I feel like that's a lot of information that should not be available to,
Is that's public knowledge though, right? Isn't that public information?
No.
That's, my comment was on union contracts, it is not an OMA, it doesn't fall under OMA, it is not open. All negotiations are confidential. Actually, they discussed that actually during the negotiations, that they can't go back to their members and talk about it until they've got a tentative agreement. That's when they can go back and talk to their unions.
That's what prompted my comment, though.
There's some legalities there even with that, to have even one individual involved that's not involved in it.
Council doesn't even know.
Correction.
Correct. That's really what
Correct.
spawned
Council
my
has no
whole
idea.
comment to start with, is like, I was kind of like that, first of all, but in a broader scope, being involved in those negotiations or even sitting in on that.
In that regard, I would further state that having a non-voting member in the hiring process, again, council is not even made aware of that until after they're hired.
That's correct.
So bringing an outside person in there, I don't know if that's the appropriate thing to do. And I have another concern with regard to, and I have a draft of the ordinance, if I may, says that paragraph C, subparagraph 2, to conduct a separate internal investigation of all cases where officers are or subject to review from the Rock Island County Integrity Task Force. First of all, do you have?
So before we go into a discussion on that, that is the original ordinance that we presented back a month ago or so. In what we just talked about was, then we held our listening sessions, and we heard back from you guys that you did not find it appropriate for a separate internal investigation to occur. And so what we just talked about, we've removed that investigation language from what we're proposing now to perhaps review or recommend, but we are no longer seeking to do a separate investigation with investigatory powers like subpoena so that's the old version. The copy, what we talk about tonight, is more of how we're working through that to come up with compromise.
I'm sorry, I just received this tonight, so I didn't know it was an old copy. So thank you for clarification.
It's the only one we
Just
have.
to
The one we have.
Yeah, we don't have the new one yet.
No, we haven't written it because we're waiting to hear back from you before we give you a final version. So this tonight is to make sure that we're actively listening, taking good note of everything that you want included, so that the next version is very complete. We've kind of worked through all these issues. Just to really quickly to respond to the high school student question, I think we looked at that for two reasons. One is that there is a shortage of police officers, and that is something everyone gave us feedback on. And so Thurgood has been very invested in training up the next generation of all kinds of people in our workforce. And so to be able to work with the high school on perhaps a program that would get young people interested in policing, maybe do some introductory policing courses, so that we have a high school to that professional pipeline in place. That's one reason we really want the high school student. Another one, just from a mental health perspective, and to what Thurgood said, young people are policed and they feel the effects of policing. So there's really good data and research on who you are in your community, how you're policed, and how that impacts your mental health, your life outcomes. And so it's kind of like no taxation without representation. These young people are impacted by these issues, and so we just feel strongly they need a voice. Now, if it was in this meeting where, maybe we have one representative voted on by the commission to observe, and perhaps we can write in that member who observes must be an adult. So I don't think we were thinking all 12 people would show up to contract negotiations.
I
It would
want you
probably
to
be
understand where I was coming from. And again, and I'll reiterate what I said initially, I'm not opposed to having a high school person. There's significant benefit of having that on the commission. But, so I should have probably left that out of that and just made the general statement of, I don't approve of being involved in police contract negotiations, and then just left it at that. Because the other stuff, there is some benefit. However, once again, I don't believe that this commission should be involved in those kind of things.
So I think we
My
hear
own
you
opinion.
saying that to have someone under the age of 18 involved in either very sensitive or employment type information would not be appropriate. And so we'll take that back with us as we try to rework this document.
First, just when your first draft, at least we have, it says 18 and older. And
Oh,
so
18.
I mean, what's that?
Okay, I'm
It says
sorry.
18 to 23. And so I get, when Thurgood and I talked, I agreed to that. I think it could be a high school senior. And of course, like most commissions, they fill out an application, if you want to call it that, and I use the word vetted, but we're talked about to make sure there's some, I'll call it maturity there, that's the intent of it, along with all the adults, along with all committee members, have that through that same process, apply that like we do now.
Mike, where does it say that, the 18 thing? I don't
I-
see that.
the draft
And
I'm
I feel
looking-
like we have so many drafts of this,
No, I
I can't
understand-
even
I
keep up
understand
with
that.
it, to
Could
be
I
honest
It
with
is.
you.
please,
It is, hang on, I
just want to ask a clarifying question. Tim, can you hear this? I don't think my mic is working.
Yeah, right there.
It's not lit, but, yeah, it doesn't.
Your green light on?
My clarifying question, can everybody hear me?
Yeah,
I have a pretty big mouth. So, is the intent of this commission to be a community police relations body or to be an investigatory body to make advisory, policy recommendations? To me, those are at two different ends of the spectrum and at odds with each other. So maybe we need to figure that point out first.
I think there is perhaps a disconnect about key concepts. The key concept for the commission is not intervention in the day-to-day of what we're doing. The initial key concept is learning. In other words, sitting in, listening to conversations and debate to really understand the issues that we're trying to think about. As a teacher, I know full well, if I want to teach you something, but I only let you have parts of the information about the problem, I will not be able to guide you to solving that problem. To really genuinely understand what we're looking at, how things work, what the arguments are on all sides, I think that's an underlying need. Without that, a commission cannot arrive at a recommendation that can be valuable. If we only have parts of the bigger picture, we cannot say, here is a valid recommendation we can make, because obviously we will have gaps in our information. And so looking at it perhaps from that perspective can help, because I think there is a fear that we aim to intervene in the day-to-day practices of what is being done. What we are hoping to do is to learn, understand better, and make recommendations both to members of the community, to organizations in the community, to those with whom we interact, and to city government and law enforcement to say, here is something we're seeing that we believe we have an understanding on, and perhaps here is something that could offer a solution. So as a key concept, perhaps that is helpful.
But a lot of those powers that, it did start picking up. A lot of those powers that you're asking for, non-voting observer type powers, I mean, council members don't even have those powers or rights?
We're not assuming that the process we have in place right now is leading us to a solution. We're observing that something is broken, and we feel that perhaps a different set of practices is needed to come at new solutions that we attempt to address these issues. So we understand that some of the things don't necessarily fit a set pattern that's in place already, and obviously all of this is up for debate, and I will step aside in a moment to let Thurgood speak. But I think attempting something new to say, if we did it this way, could we perhaps succeed at something?
I guess for me, I would like to see a specific example in writing in one of these situations and spell out how the commission would act to address a certain concern or issue, to get a better understanding of how it would operate based on what you're wanting. Do you understand what I'm asking?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
One of the things that we ran into when we were dealing with public officials, period, was that they felt like we were trying to oversee or step in their boundaries. And that is not what this commission is trying to do. Recently, a coach named Jason Kidd was hired for the Dallas Mavericks. Many people criticized him because he didn't have a winning record. But one of the things they said about him is that he could relate to the players now. The problem we have with the police and community relations is that we are still operating in a mode that do as I say and don't say anything else. We need to be at the table. We need to be at the table not to tell you what to do. Being at the table allows you to act different. Being at the table allows you to hear different opinions. I'm sorry, I told this to every teacher that my kids are in high school. You are not the number one teacher of my child. I am. The number one policer of our community is not the police department. It's the community. And until we empower the community to help our police officers do their job, we're going to continue to see what we see. The reason why crime rates are up is because people are not fulfilling their responsibilities. Cops, police officers are asked to be parents, truancy officers, counselors, all those things. This commission would help bridge the gap so that we can put things in place to help them do what they were been trained to do, which is to serve and protect. But it also will make our community better because we're putting the community, because we were doing a lot of talking about what we're asking the police department to do. This commission does not just ask police officers to do things. It asks our community to step back up to the plate and take responsibility. Those are two different things. And another thing was that you were asking for powers that we don't have as council. It's not that we're asking for powers that you don't have in council. We're asking for powers that you don't have time to deal with as council.
No, that's wrong.
Real quick, two clarifications, I guess. I agreed, and maybe, just for the age-wise, it's 18 and older is what I was intended to. So that was more, it reads here, for college students and everything else, 18 to 23.
High school students.
High school, I got to say that my comfort level is I'm not opposed to a high school student, but I'm not sure a freshman or a junior, and Thurgood, you and I talked about this. I think it needs to be a senior age, 17, 18 type of a deal, and of course, then the application and everything else.
That's not a problem.
No, I didn't think it would be, but I just wanted, for clarification, when I made that statement earlier, clarification. The other is, when it comes to union negotiations and everything else, you got to remember, it's not all what, even if this council here said, we agree to have somebody sit in and listen, we only got half the say-so. The union, when they come to the table, has the other half. Both halves have to agree to things. And so that hasn't happened yet either. We can't control that and demand that. But once again, it is not good for community relations. It's not good for negotiations to have somebody sitting in the room that is not part of the negotiations. attorneys will tell you that left and right, that if you're not going to be part of it, you shouldn't be in there, even just as a fly on the wall to understand. Now, if somebody wants to come out and communicate later of what's going on in there, if both sides agree that that can talked about and relayed, that's a different story. That if both sides agree, that we will inform the commission, if they both agree, on how things are going and what topics are talked about, that's a different story. They may not agree, and so it may not happen. And I'm not sitting here making any promises. I'm just saying is that that's the way it's done, and there's legalese and as to that, with that. So.
Makes sense. Thank you.
Can I make this one comment? I think we have to understand the fact that we can't continue to do the same thing to get a different result. That means you have to kind of step outside of the box, think outside of the box, and look to bring something to the table that is not the same cookie cutter approach to address these issues.
I agree.
So a lot of the things that they are proposing, it might feel uncomfortable because no one's ever brought it up before. That doesn't mean it won't be successful. This is why we're here, to discuss these things, to try different things that's going to hopefully work. Everything that we've been doing since the 70s, the 50s, the 60s, it's all the same. We get a police commission. They have a couple meetings with the community. No one shows up, so they give up, and then we move on to something else. This is a little bit different because now we're getting the community invested. We're getting invested members who are actually signing up for a term to serve in this capacity. It's not just, it is volunteer, but it's not just, hey, we're going to announce a meeting, we need people to show up, and then talk about the concerns and hopefully get a solution. This is a little bit different. Again, we got to think outside the box in order to try to come with any kind of conclusion of how to solve these issues that we're facing. So just be open-minded, like we stated before. It's a discussion. So that doesn't mean everything down here on paper has to be concrete. It's a compromise. Things we didn't know or things that they didn't know, that's where discussions come out and you kind of weed those things out and say, how can you perfect that process and move forward with it?
I agree. And
So I would like to say in response that I don't think the council as a whole is thinking this is, it kind of sounds like you're thinking that we're not thinking outside the box, and I think there's a lot of things that I think that we agree that should take place, but this is why we're having these conversations, because there's legalities, there's other situations, we have to bring to the table the things that you just can't do, or we don't think, like the contract negotiations. That's not thinking, as the way it sits right now, we can't, it's not feasible right now.
I just said you can't do it because we never tried. This like the mayor said, we have one part, the police have another part. So if we talk to the unions with the police department, and hey, they might be for it. But if we're already knocking it down by saying, no, you can't do that, you're already creating a glass ceiling for yourself. You're saying you can't.
So I guess I'm asking, let me ask this. What is the purpose of being involved in the police contract, which is a compensation and benefit package, basically? What is the commission's, why is that the commission's, why should they have involvement in this?
not involvement.
I've done contract negotiations before in my former life. The reason why you want that in there, because of the situation that we are in with pensions and everything as in compensation have come because the same people have been behind the same room with nobody else listening.
I understand.
And so
What does
now
that
we
have to
are.
do with this?
It has everything to do with it.
Okay.
It has. Well, you can disagree. That's what
Fine,
you
go ahead.
And what I'm trying to tell you is, people act different when other people are in the room. There are things that are not going to be said. There are deals that are not going to be made when someone else is in the room. We have deals now that the city is paying for that is no fault of yours, that you can't hardly pay. And that is impacting our tax-paying dollar.
So are you asking as a community relations thing, or are you asking as a financial advisor? I'm not sure what you're looking for here.
Well, you tell you what, I will give you my number, and we can sit down, and I will buy you lunch, and I'll answer as many questions as you can, because I don't think you and I are going to have
the other day,
that.
and I had one person show up for a meeting the other day, so I wish you would have showed up for that meeting.
I was there, I didn't see you there, so that's again.
We can ask Hanukkah, I was
Got to be
there.
conscious of our time. ladies and
Again.
gentlemen.
Seems like this is a
Again,
personal
see
issue.
me afterwards.
if
See
I
me
may.
afterwards, and I'll talk to you.
I would have asked those
Let's work
questions
it.
previously, is what I'm
That's
saying.
correct. That's
Okay.
correct. No, I just want to be conscious of our time. and we got to keep moving forward.
So
Make
I
sure
guess-
everybody gets addressed.
I have a couple questions, since I haven't said a whole lot. So the pension thing, that's not a city decision, is it?
That's state
Isn't
law.
it a state?
That's state law.
So,
Yeah, so the city has absolutely zero. I mean, we are stuck with the pensions, and we cannot, that's a state-level thing to be dealt with. But what I want to say is, I am supportive of the commission in the revised format that you have done. One of the things that I think is the most beneficial is the review of incidents where you can look at what happened, the whole, review things after the fact, after it's all been resolved, and determine how could people have behaved differently? What action could you have taken, either party, that would have resulted in a more favorable or a different outcome? And to me, that is the most valuable part of the commission, is the learning education part, that, somebody did A, which caused this chain reaction to happen. Had they chosen to do something else, this chain reaction would have happened and a better outcome would have come. To me, that is the whole crux and the benefit of this commission. I also don't agree with, and I think you did take it, I was confused a little bit, you took it off the table, that you wanted to have a seat and vote on hiring and promotions. I don't think that the commission should have any say-so in that. I think this organization and the fact that, it's not always, it's not a secret society who's going to be put on the police department. So if you have an issue with someone who's going to be put on the police department that you don't feel should be there, then this commission does have the right to voice that and to state why.
most definitely, and I appreciate that, Ms. Swanson. I'm going to wrap around two things, including your point, with being conscious of time. As far as the negotiations, even at this point, because it's urgency, excuse me, that's not going to stop the creation of this commission. I think we're nitpicking.
Appreciate that.
And I think that to speak to meetings that we had, it's Thurgood Brooks and Friends that presented this. It's bigger than me. And I have a great team that is responsible and mature enough to speak to what we are working to do. And so respectfully, we were there. My team was there to meet with you with all due respect. And so I will also say that as for the hiring panel, position seat, a lot of that comes from understanding again. And we're willing to understand and accept that representation of this commission, once again, may not have a vote to make a decision. But I'm sitting here today with, behind me I have two individuals who are Rock Island natives. They graduated from Rock Island High School. One went off into the military. One went off to school and studied the very field of law enforcement. They both just made a conscious decision to come back to Rock Island. And they both have been put on list in other police departments here locally to be on the next step to be a police officer. But for some reason, and they have their separate numerous letters, and this is not just them, I'm speaking to two, they were denied multiple times. And so could this commission that's tasked with building the bridge behind Police Racing Commission, and I might add both are people of color, which is something that the commission talks about as far as recruiting more officers of people of color, getting into that field. Both people of color, both from natives of Rock Island, both came here consciously and cannot get on the list to be here at Rock Island but can't go elsewhere. Could this commission sit on that panel where they went before to be hired potentially, even if they don't have decision-making power, if those two individuals, and I know others, but this is just more recent, if those two individuals came to this commission with a complaint or a concern or whatever the verbiage we use, that how to get a hold of the said commission when it's formed, and said, hey, we were denied again, what could we have done differently? What couldn't we do? And then maybe this commission can say, hey, we've been on several of these panels. We got a workshop that we're going to put together. And we're going to put this workshop together to help better prepare that Rock Island native that came back here consciously, that has family members, and that lives in communities who have a lot of mistrust with community and with the police. Could that commission do that? But would they be able to do that if they are not included and they're not aware of what's really going on? It'd be impossible. And so that's the idea of it. I think if we're willing to be bold and open, courageous, creative, and mission-focused, we can get that done. So that was where we're getting at with that, Ms. Swanson.
Can I make, oh, go ahead.
First of all, with regard to the two individuals that didn't get hired, reach out to them, have them contact the police department. I'm sure our police department would love to work with qualified young men. I'm sure, and you see the gentleman in the back here, Deputy Chief Landy, and I'm sure that if you talk to him, he can have one of his staff tell you how you can better prepare yourself. We have police officers that are on the department now that can help you prepare for that test and help you be better prepared to go in for the interview. And if all else fails, come and talk to me. I've been through the process. I would love to sit down and talk with young men and women who are interested in becoming law enforcement officers.
How many years ago? Oh.
Well, that's the point.
They cannot be my age. I was told today that I've been, and I won't go into that, but
Got to
I guess
lighten it up a little
guess
bit.
that's the point, and I will. That's the point, Mr. Poulos. But I think this commission will be better suited to do that because they're tasked with these matters, and we're building something from there. So, yes, Mayor Thomas.
Well, the second thing I was going to say is
Yes.
the fact that I talked to a friend of mine who is on another police department, and I asked him, do they have a commission similar to this? And they do. And it is operating very well, but it is significantly different. It is more of a police community commission, many of the same powers, a little bit more restrictive than what you've asked for here. But they are, like you said, we're building it. We're thinking outside the box, and we may not have the perfect mold right now, but if we get started, and then we can expand that role as the level of trust from the police department and the commission build together. You know, and it has to be a level of trust on both sides. And trust is not given, it's earned. So the police department has to earn that trust. The commission has to earn that trust.
I think the commission is where we're starting with to gain that trust. I think the trust is, the mistrust is community and the police, but the commission help with tasks to build that trust. And so I'm hopeful we get that done.
Yeah. How about Judith?
Thank you, Mayor. So one thing I could see this commission assisting the city with, the new council has often talked about using data to drive decisions. And so this commission could be very helpful in taking different data or requesting specific data, analyzing that data, putting the metrics on a dashboard, and then making policy recommendations from what they see after analyzing the data. That's something I would say.
And that's a big point Mayor Thomas and I talked about.
Absolutely.
And one idea that I had as you're talking about the two gentlemen who would like to be police officers is maybe instead of looking at having a seat and a vote on hiring and promotions, maybe the commission can be instrumental in fostering a mentoring program where those people who want to be police officers from our community can be matched with a mentor on the police department that will help them understand. I mean, there's a lot of mentoring programs in the Quad Cities that are doing a phenomenal job, but this one would be specific to helping them understand, you know, this is what it takes, this is the steps that you have to go to, and that in turn is going to foster a more positive relationship with the police and the community.
I think that's a great recommendation. I think that we will make that addition in our draft.
Thurgood, I got one last, I'm sorry.
That's fine.
Then I'll
Go
be
for
done.
it.
So a couple things. How does the commission plan on funding some of the activities or the the procedures and things that you want to do? How will the
Funding
commission
such
be
as what?
funding? Well, I mean, you're going to have to, there's a lot of things in place, like we want to put together a plan to do this, a plan to do that. I mean, is there social media?
Can you be specific as far as what?
Well, I mean, like materials or would it, I mean, some things, you're going to have to fund some things,
think-
right? As far
I
as
think,
like
Randy,
your-
I think-
For like a campaign, I guess I should say.
This is not a campaign, Randy.
No. What I'm saying is, if you're trying to get the word out and you've got a plan to address certain things, are you not, how are you spreading the word? Or if you're, whatever, how is that going to be done?
I don't think cost comes in with that. I think, as a member of the Human Rights Commission, I could be wrong. I've been on for about 3 years now, going to my fourth. We meet, we review what we do. We're tasked with doing some of the things. Some of the things in this draft are similar to what the Human Rights Commission does.
Sure.
As far as request program recommendations, cost doesn't come up when what we do. We don't pay for print to print things off. If it's a mailing, we haven't mailed anything out. But what I will say is, if we're talking about cost for a meet and greet, I'm sure the people are investing in the community enough to raise $200 to blow some balloons up and rent out the King Center. I'm sure $200 or so wouldn't be the problem. They may even do it for free.
Yeah, they may.
So
Yeah,
I don't think
they
that'd be
may.
a problem.
None of our other commissions, short of the
I have a,
parade.
I have a question for Deputy Chief Landy, if he, could I ask a question up here as it relates to this a little bit?
This is Alderman Geenan. Can I make a comment to the commission first?
Yes.
Thank you, to Mr. Brooks, and to all of your crew, Reverend and Miss Amelia and Doctor. I just got to say one thing. You've reread my response. I took some significant time with your document, went through the 7th Ward, and in all sincerity, talked to retired judges, talked to people who've worked in the state's attorney's office, talked to people in public law office, and you have my response. Everything that's been shared tonight, I think, validates what you've been hearing from the 7th Ward. The only extra comments I have based on what you've shared tonight is, one, absolutely, this is involved in a trust-based relationship, and trust starts on both ends, so I really appreciate that. The only comment I'd like to make on this whole ageism issue is that knowledge is powerful. And I remember just from my own personal experience being identified in high school as a potential leader and being told I couldn't do something because I wasn't a senior. We changed the rules, and I'm a city council member today. And I really think my experience of doing something new and different by someone identifying the leadership in me, I think what we're looking for is not an age person, Mr. Mayor. I think we're looking for the qualified candidates that can help the city and Rock Island move in the right direction. So I think we're on the right step, and I'll finish talking from there. Thank you.
Thank you. Real quick, excuse me.
Sorry.
No.
Last-
Last thing I want to do is cut off the deputy chief.
Yeah, don't do that.
Just being called up for a question, I think.
So a quick question, when did the city discontinue the cadet program? And is that something that we can look into as far as getting more youths involved again and, I guess, getting into the,
We never really discontinued it. It's been suspended because of COVID.
okay.
But as far as the Explorers program, I believe is what you're talking about there. So as far as I know, as soon as we can get back to conditions where that we can resume, as far as I know, we're going to start resuming, going back to the cadet, or being able to do the Explorers.
And do we reach out to the high school? How do we reach out to the youth as far, because I'm not familiar, I don't remember how that all works, but how do we reach out to those prospective cadets to try to get them involved?
I know that the high school is involved. I believe there's an application process that's done if they want to become a police explorer, and they submit it to the police department, and then they can be accepted that way.
Could you get that information to Mr. Brooks and his team so that they're aware of that, and that's a possibility to try to incorporate some more youth that are interested in the police program?
Sure, and just for information, the police department for many years was involved in a program with the high school. We worked together called Lights and Sirens, and that was one of the intents behind it, was obviously to try to get high schoolers involved in emergency, both police and fire, to try to recruit that next generation. And we would go in there and do these classes throughout the week. It was actually a regular class that students could sign up for and participate in, and then got a grade for it. So we really enjoyed it, and it was something that I think had some benefit, yes. So, you know, we've tried many, many things. It's obviously a challenge in recruitment.
It is, and I just wanted to get that out there and make sure they're aware of this, and so that I think right now is a good opportune time to explore that opportunity as well. And
Well, that's true of the Boy Scouts though, right?
Thank you, Deputy Chief. We were aware of that program, and we were aware of suspended, but I think you're missing the point there again. I'm gonna get back to you, promise, because I know time is of the
I know.
essence.
Yep.
We're talking about community members who, if you ask them to apply for interest to be involved with the police officers, a lot of them, because of distrust, regardless of their age. Hold on, Mr. Hurt.
Earlier relationship and get that back on track.
I get
That's
that. This is my point. I'm trying to make my point as far as, because I believe you brought that for a reason. I believe you brought him up to say that program was available for a reason. And from my understanding from your reason, I'm going to respond by saying this commission has members on it that will go into communities and speak with members that have kids who typically are told, do not be a police officer. So that person, that kid, that child would not be in the licensed siren class that I was in. That child would not go for an application at today's day and age to apply to be a cadet in the program that you referenced. And so this commission could change that. So if this commission has a mentorship program of their own that maybe works hand in hand with the cadet program, that would be a better way to foster building up and raising a diverse pool of candidates, future cadets, however you want to put it, into the positions of police officers or any other part of the police department. And so don't miss the point as far as they're not being programs there. There's many programs to address homelessness. There's many programs for veterans. There's many programs to address any other issue. But one agency does not just that problem for a greater outcome. And so I hope we're not insinuating that
I'm
is
just
what we
bringing
need
up
to do.
one piece of a solution, one piece of a puzzle for a long-term solution. It wasn't an overall derogatory statement on any one thing. It's more like, hey, the more pieces you can have to a puzzle, to put the puzzle together, I want to make sure that that's out there. I was unaware that you knew about such a program, so it's just me being responsible and just making sure the information's out there. If you take it some other way, I apologize.
So let me just, two other comments, and one of them
course.
is pretty broad, so I hate to go backwards with it. But one is, at least at this point, the ordinance that we have here, and choosing the members and go through the application process like we normally do in everything else, it spells out that the resolution and the mayor before being appointed. I have a tough time being specifically the resolution. Calling out a specific organization. You and I had this conversation. I have no problem with I'll call it a third party, in consulting with, trying to find out something generic versus a specific, organization.
And yes, and you and I spoke to that. And I think one thing I mentioned that I think the concern you had, correct me if I'm wrong, was that perhaps the resolution wouldn't be around later on. And you're, as Julie noted, and maybe not. I can address.
And NAACP may not either.
Yeah, and so
whatever,
my point is
that somehow to put a generic deal in there for consultation with.
And I think at that time, appropriate time, we can make amendments. That's what any committee, commission, governmental body does. They amend things at every level. We're doing that at the Human Rights Commission currently. And so at this time, I think it's appropriate because I do think at this time, with the resolution being the creator and pushing this initiative forward and working with you and having coming to an understanding.
Right.
I believe we came to an understanding, Mr. Thomas.
That's fine.
And I think that'll be fruitful.
I just want to bring it up to council for them to think about and however they wish to see that adjust. The other would be, and this is really a broad going back, but it goes back to the opening statements by your team. This is good. What would happen if we called it the Community Relations Commission versus the police? We talked about it's not just police, it's the citizens. It's, there's community amongst community issues, not just police and community. As we see some of the violence we see today, it has nothing to do with the police. It's different individuals in the community. It may not even be in Rock Island, but there's a lot of issues and lack of trust within the community at places. And so I get, what would happen, or what's wrong with making it a little bit broader that way in working with issues, because they do dovetail together, that are maybe not even involving the police?
I think something we may could look at differently, but I think it's important to identify what they're addressing. And I keep referencing what I'm involved in, but the library, well, I'm not involved in the library commission. The library commission doesn't address literacy problems overall. You follow what I'm getting at? Although they are a library, they have books, and they talk about what the library does. So this police commission is addressing policing and community issues. And so it's not, and maybe the verbiage does sound like it's pitting community versus policing.
Yeah.
But I think it's appropriate to have a body that is clear understanding where our citizens can go, because I would hate to have someone look to request the services of this commission as we've compromised to, and go to it and just see community and miss what they're looking for. And so I think it's important to address where we're getting at.
We're obviously trying to work on unity, and I think we all agree that this commission is important, and it can play an important part. And so I just want to try to work with that unity deal, because it can have the connotation of division when you specifically spell out a specific area or department where it's not even just city against the community, it's really community issues. There's a lot of things that are beyond the control of the city, but maybe we can help give directives or work on policies, or somehow facilitate. Yes.
So one way you'll know we're successful is that a year from now, you could say the same police community relations commission, and that thought won't even cross your mind within 5 years. We should be able to say the word police and community without a division coming to our minds. And so, it's okay to use those two words together, as AJ talked about in his intro. So our goal is that you can use those words together. They support each other. There's communication and dialogue that has to happen there. But if we just make it about the community, we'll lose focus of the relationships that we're trying to repair.
Of course, but how we're losing time, and unfortunately, we'd only lose focus if the committee allowed it to lose that focus. But we do have to, unfortunately, we have 3 minutes until the next meeting starts.
No, I appreciate that. And so what we'll do, and I hope we didn't miss anything. We spoke about a lot. The concerns we had, we will, and actually, there was only one draft sent. There wasn't multiple drafts. It was one. When we reference the draft that we will be sending to you again, it's one that is suited from the compromise and the redactions based off of the conversations that myself and my team had with everyone. And so we'll send that draft to you all, the second draft, to you all in the next 48 to 72 hours. And our hope is that we can get that pushed forward for a vote within the next, it's about 30 days now. And appreciate your time.
You bet. Thank you. Okay.